Good morning, everyone. We're going to start in about 30 seconds. I can see that we still have folks in the lobby that we are inviting in. So give us about 30 seconds and we're going to jump right into May's principal chat. Okay, good morning, everyone. It looks like we have everyone who is joining us this morning in the webinar. So good morning, everyone. I'm Scott Hunt. I'm the Executive Director of Field Relations here at the Department of Education. I'm a former superintendent, was a middle school principal for 5 years, a high school assistant for 5 years, and did some other things along the way, teaching and counseling, etc. So certainly want to welcome everyone to this month's principal chat. And if we can go to the next slide, I'll talk through the agenda real quick. So this morning we'll kick off with some introductions around the room here. We'll provide you with some general updates from the department. And then we're going to transition into probably the bulk of interest for you in terms of leadership with advancing inclusive leadership. Then we'll end with a Q&A, and then we are scheduled for our next chat on June 14th. So I'm going to start with those of us in the room who will be speaking today, just to give your name and your role, and then we'll jump into the program. So Jill, why don't we start with you?
Hello, everyone. I'm Jill Grubb, Associate Director in the Office of Educator Effectiveness. And I have 18 years of leadership in the public schools before coming to the administration, or before coming to the department. And 18 years of classroom experience before jumping into leadership. So I've experienced quite a bit over the years. Becky, turn it over to you.
Well, hi there, everyone. I'm Becky Hornberger. I am the Executive Director at OAESA, our Elementary Principals Association, and I'm here to represent our associations as well as OASSA, our partners, Tim Freeman there at OASSA as well. We both welcome you, so thanks for being here.
Johanna?
Hi, I'm Johanna Ward, and I'm the Director of the Office for Exceptional Children at the department. I've been at the department for 18 years and served either in the Office for Exceptional Children or as Director of the Office for Improvement and Innovation for a short time. But prior to that, I did have the lucky experience of supervising principals for about 6 years with the Department of Youth Services. So that's where my supervision of leadership comes in for principals in the school system. Thanks.
Great. Johanna, do you want to kind of give a brief intro and let our guests from Poland Seminary introduce themselves?
Absolutely. So thank you for inviting us to come speak with you all today and share the great excitement that's happening around the Advancing Inclusive Principal Leadership work. We are in partnership, like our office, Educator Effectiveness Office, Scott Hunt's whole team, and the Office of Improvement and Innovation, along with, of course, our friends at the OAESA in partnership there. And we're very excited about this opportunity to partner with school districts and teams. And so we're going to share more about that today and what it looks like to provide and engage together in digging deep around inclusive instructional leadership practices and how teams bring those practices to life and sustain them. And I'll have Becky introduce our Poland team.
Yes, yes. So we at the association have been so excited to support AIPL in particular and the inclusive instructional leadership programs overall, which are offered through a partnership through the Department of Ed and the UC SDI Center. So we've been really excited about that work throughout the year. And Poland is definitely one of our standout teams. We've been so happy to engage with them in AIPL. They are in their first year of the program. And so I just want to say a special welcome to the team from Poland. We do have here with us Maria Hofmaster, who is the assistant superintendent at Poland. We also have David Purins, who's a middle school building principal. We have Wendy Butch, who is a school counselor, Nick Henry, who is a math teacher, and we also have Haley Schaefer, who's a sixth grade language arts and social studies teacher. And we have their coach with them as well, which you'll be hearing more about the coaching component with AIPL. Their coach is Paula Ekis. So she is here with us as well. And you might have noticed that as we mentioned those teams, the team members, that they have different roles at the schools beyond just building level leader. And that's what's really important about the AIPL program, is that it's a vertical team. And so this is a perfect example. Poland is a perfect example of a vertical team, because we know as building leaders that our job is not done in isolation, and it really takes the team to move improvement efforts forward. So we're going to be excited as Johanna speaks to us about AIPL, and you can learn a little bit more about inclusive instructional leadership, to hear the Poland team's experiences and some of the great work that they're doing in their district.
Awesome. Thank you. And a shameless plug for both of our associations. If you're not a member of your association, I would encourage you to get on their websites, look at their membership information, and encourage your school and your district to join your association. They provide a variety of different opportunities for you to learn and grow. So please join your association. Okay, I'm getting ready to go to the next slide. We're not going to do it just yet, but for those who are participating, somewhere on your screen, there should be a chat box. I want you to click on that, because I'm going to ask you to respond to the next slide. And so as I pull this up here momentarily, I want you to look at it. I'll read it to you, and then just top of mind, first thing that you think of when you see this image. So let's go to the next slide and get ready to hit your chat. Being a principal is easy. It's like riding a bike, except the bike is on fire, you're on fire, everything is on fire, especially in May. So let's see some reactions to that.
Yes, it's all on fire. Laugh out loud. Agree. Haha. True story.
Yeah, every day.
This morning, exactly. I'm sure there's some stories behind these comments.
Absolutely. Riding that bike and going nowhere while in a tornado. Yeah, we can certainly add to the image, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. Because May, you're excited to be wrapping up the end of the year, and you've got all your award ceremonies and graduations and music concerts and all of that going on. But at the same time, you're totally building out what next school year is going to look like. You've got your schedule. You've probably already building out a class list. You got your feet in both worlds in it. I remember back in the day, for me, May was that month of, oh my gosh, am I going to survive?
I see our friend Carrie Sanchez weighing in, a former principal, now honored to be one who helps extinguish the fires. Absolutely. Yeah, so we know your job is tough, and I do a lot of engagement with BASS, our Superintendents Association, as well as with our principals, and so again, just to note, thank you for all of the hard work that you put in to take care of your staff, your students, your families and communities. It is not an easy job, but it should be easier. I've heard now that we are officially out of the pandemic, so things should really be looking up from here on out. So thanks for engaging with us and sharing some thoughts about your role. So absolutely appreciate your commentary. So let's go to the next slide. And Jill, I think you want to give the update on the web pages.
Yeah, I'll keep this brief. If you have not had the opportunity to look at our Ohio Principal Leadership Supports landing page on the department's website, I'm going to ask Donna to put the link back into the chat. Please take a few minutes and visit this page. It's got the admin calendar, the professional development link, educator licensure, a list of all the associations that you may need to reach out to connected to education across the state, higher education, as well as resources. The resources are 12 big buckets of the work that's happening at the department. Also aligned to the principal standards. So please take a look at that. These pages will be kept as current as possible as things change, but it's a resource for you. So just want to put that reminder out there. And Scott, I think we're going back to you to talk about budget.
Yeah, so let me wow you with the state budget, the governor's recommendations, and how that may impact you as a building principal. I can tell you, as a building principal, this is one thing that I never really looked closely at, was what was happening with the state biennium. But I think it's important to point out some things for you, because there is a considerable amount of money that potentially is going to be allocated to support the work that you're doing. Not only the work that you're doing, but the governor's budget is also aligned to the State Board of Education's priorities under the umbrella of Future Forward Ohio. So if you didn't know this, here's the timeline. So the governor submits a budget proposal to the legislature in January. February through April, it's considered in the House. We're now out of April and into May. May through June, there's consideration for those recommendations in the Senate. In June, there's a conference committee to kind of coalesce, maybe build consensus around what's going to stick in terms of those potential allocations. And then July 1, the biennium budget begins. It's a 2-year budget for fiscal years 24 and 25. And so there's been a lot of discussion and a lot of changes that have occurred from February until today, and there still maybe changes to come. One thing that I might note here is that when that budget is signed by the governor, some things will become effective and implemented immediately, and others will not kick in until, I believe it's 90 days after that budget is signed. And so for you in the planning process for next year right now, there might be some immediate implication for you, and other things that you're planning for and maybe expecting some additional funding around, you may have to wait until those dollars are available and the programming around it is implemented. So let's go to the next slide, and I'll try to keep this very high level for you. You'll be able to go back and look at these slides. So if you weren't aware, under Future Forward Ohio, we have priorities here that we are aligned to and that the state board is aligned to in terms of what their budget recommendations were to the governor and the governor's recommendations back to the legislature. So currently in literacy as it stands, to support early childhood education, $122.2 million currently is an increase from what it was a few weeks ago. There's this, and this is specific to literacy. So educator professional development, 43 million over the biennium. This is to provide stipends for teachers to get training around the science of reading, specifically in elementary K-5, as well as our 6-12 English language arts teachers, and then additional stipends for other content areas. So that's an important one to keep an eye on. It was at 86 million, now at 43 million, not sure where that will land. There's been a great effort across the state to make sure that teachers have high quality instructional materials in their hand, $44 million over the biennium there. One thing that we're currently working on that this hasn't changed, $6 million in FY24, $12 million in 25 to support the implementation of 100 literacy coaches across the state to serve our highest needs districts in terms of where students are on proficiency scores to support literacy directly in a school building. More to come with that if this is going to be part of the budget. And then the state is required to provide you a dyslexia screener. This $1.2 million will flow through the department to develop that free of charge to districts to use. All right, that's literacy. Let's go to the next slide. The other priority for the state board, the governor, and the department is around learning acceleration. I'm sure that you've heard about a great deal about this over the last year in terms of being able to provide high dosage tutoring. And so when we talk about learning acceleration here, we're talking about providing more and more opportunities for students to learn. And this has been a response to the pandemic. We know that kids aren't where they're supposed to be. So there's $15 million in FY25 to support high dosage tutoring. We're partnering with Higher Ed. We have the statewide math and literacy tutoring grant, and we are trying to identify tutors that can deliver this high dosage tutoring. We're also supporting in that budget readiness assessments that you could use at the district level and regional data leads. And if you don't know what those are real quick, our RDLs are individuals who are able to help a district or a school collect, organize, and analyze student data so that you can have that data in front of you to make some database decisions when you are talking about how you will instruct students and get them to improve their achievement and progress. We send those folks down to the SAS Institute in North Carolina. They learn all about the secret sauce and the data, and they come back here and they help support our schools and districts. Next slide. So I'm not sure that you are aware of this. I'm sure you are, but the lieutenant governor as well as the governor have been focused on workforce readiness here since they started their initial term. And so there are dollars that are going to be provided to support workforce readiness, making sure students have a pathway out of our schools into a career. And so over the biennium, there's $300 million allocated to workforce readiness, $100 million for the purchase of equipment, $200 million for facilities through the Ohio Facilities Council. There's also dollars that will be allocated to promote career awareness and exploration. There's this phase-in of career awareness and exploration funds, as well as updating the portals for the Ohio Means Jobs K-12 upgrades. We're also providing incentives for business advisory councils. And so as a principal, I would hope that you're aware that all districts are required to participate in either a locally developed business advisory council, but many go through their educational service centers for that work. And so this funding is to support the efforts to create or to continue to maintain strong relationships with local businesses so they can provide feedback and support to create that pathway out of school into a career. So that's very important work that's happening, and we continue to support that concept across the state. Next slide. Workforce readiness, there are dollars that will be allocated for industry recognized credentials and work-based learning incentives. Those come back to the district in the way of reimbursements for or incentives for making sure that students do have those pathways. There's $15 million to support College Credit Plus, making sure that our teachers that are in our schools, in our high schools, have the opportunity to teach those College Credit Plus coursework in your district. So $15 million to support that training over the course of the biennium. And then the Ohio Military Veteran Educator Program, $6.45 million over the biennium. And this is also an effort not only to encourage our military veterans to step into the education field, but also to help us fill that pipeline. We know that there's a shortage of educators out there for you to choose from. Next slide. So the other priority here is around student wellness and safety. Part of the governor's budget 4 years ago, almost 4 years ago, was about $645 million to support student wellness and success. Last biennium, these dollars were wrapped directly into the funding formula, and they will continue to be in the funding formula. That districts will have access to that to support anything that they're doing specific to student wellness and success. There's also $15 million over the biennium for school-based health centers. I know that there are districts across the state who are very focused on either embedding or actually constructing spaces to make sure that students and families and community have an opportunity to get their physical and mental health needs met, primarily so that we can keep students in school. And so there's dollars allocated for that. The other piece that was part of this that currently is not, but might end up back in it, is this whole concept around providing support for school resource officers. So there was initially an allocation or a recommendation that is now off the table, but it might show up again prior to the end of the budget process. Next slide. And so if you're not aware, the Fair School Funding Act formula is really continues to be phased in. So this phase in of the funding formula for FY24, 50% of those dollars increasing in 25, 66.67. I think the important piece here is when you look at the base cost for funding, and there is a list of items and positions that make up that base cost. Previously, we were using or going to use FY18 dollar information. We are now at the FY22 salary, insurance, expenditures, inputs, which will provide actually an increase as we move forward because we're using current numbers. So I think that's important, and we're hopeful that that is going to stay at that level for FY22. Next slide. Just a couple of things, just an awareness for you. This is something that we ask that you share with your families. This is not something that you implement, but we want you to communicate this to your families. The After School Child Enrichment Program, or ACE, became effective April 7th. Families, students, children that are ages 6 through 18 are eligible if their adjusted gross income in the household is below 400% of federal poverty level, or if there's participation in a government program where the income eligibility is below 400% of the federal poverty level, or that family student resides in a district with the highest 10% rate of chronic absenteeism, or they have an EdChoice eligible school. Parents can have in that account a value of $1,000 per child. And we are asking, if you do have questions, we are holding sessions, the Ask ACE information sessions that you can access on our website. And so there is a link there that will take you to that. Some of the things, let's go to the next slide. Some of the things that families do use those dollars for are day camps, field trips, tutoring, music, art, study skills, etc. So there are a variety of allowable uses for those dollars that allow parents to specifically select how they want to support their student in that learning. So we just ask that you share that with your families. And I think that concludes the budget. I kind of zipped through that because I didn't want that to be the focus, but I think it's important for you to know, especially at a building level, that these are the types of things that happen at the state level that we hope will support the work that is happening in your buildings and in your district. So I am going to stop. Thank you. And I'm going to kick it back to Jill, Johanna, and the group to talk about Ohio Advancing Inclusive Principal Leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. The budget's very exciting this time around. There's so much in there for education, and that supports all of us in supporting our efforts. It's really great. So let's talk about AIPL, or the long way to say it is Advancing Inclusive Principal Leadership. So if we go to the next slide here, one more. First, I want to say, like, this, as I understand, the principal chats are free flowing, like we're sharing information, but we do want the chat part to happen. So we want to invite you to share your ideas, your thoughts in the chat. We'll ask a few questions along the way. Please put your responses in the chat. We want to hear from you. There are no right or wrong answers. So we want to learn from each other, right? So we're excited about that. One thing we can start off the chat with, before we even get started explaining what the AIPL experience and partnership is, what are some things that you do that are inclusive practices? And while you're putting that in the chat, I'll start talking some more about what we focus on in this experience, the AIPL experience. So there are 4 inclusive instructional leadership domains that we focus on in this experience. We have partner districts that join us with vertical teams, and we'll talk about what those are in a few minutes. But we hone in, really sharpen our tools around prioritizing the improvement of teaching and learning, building capacity through support and accountability, sustaining an open and collaborative culture, and promoting system-wide learning. So there is no right or wrong answer in those spaces. Let's go to the next slide. Of course, I think this slide you should all be familiar with, right? This is our standards for principals. And you see how it's organized by the 4 areas: leadership, learning, culture, and management. And so the next few slides, I'm just going to show you really quickly. We're not going to spend a lot of time here, but show you how those 4 domains line up to the standards. So we color coded them. So you see the first standard on leadership, you see the principal standards on the left side, and then the domains that we are talking about, those 4, where they sit in connection to the leadership standards. I'm not going to read all that. You all can read it, but it's just a visual to show you how we've purposely matched these pieces up. And the next one is the learning domain, and the 2 principal standards there, in which domain that we focus on in the inclusive instructional leadership practices. The next one is the climate domain. So you can see that one's sustaining the open and collaborative culture all the way across. And then the last one is management. And that one's building the capacity through support and accountability. So I'll pause there and see if Becky wants to add anything to those. Or Jill.
Yes, no, I just wanted to mention that I do think that that's a really powerful piece of the program. We will talk in a moment as well about the research base and the methods for evaluation of AIPL, and it is very rigorously evaluated, and also alignment is really sought in all aspects of AIPL as well.
Yeah, thank you, Becky. I also want to add, I know that, I'm here from the Office for Exceptional Children, and that might scare some people into thinking oh, this is just about special ed. So please erase that thought out of your mind. This is not about just special education. When we talk about inclusive practices, it's about the broad inclusive, right? It's not just about any one particular group. It's about being inclusive broadly. So just be aware of that. Thanks. All right, our next slide. There are 3 actually big projects that we work in conjunction with. We at the agency, the Educator Effectiveness Office, the School Improvement Office, Scott Hunt, my team. We all work to support these 3 bigger projects. which OLI 4, and that is the Ohio Leadership for Inclusion, Implementation, and Instructional Improvement. It's a 2-year professional learning program that builds the capacity of school principals and assistant principals to improve results for all students, including those from those marginalized groups, students with disabilities, students living in poverty, or students with learning difficulties, through the development of instructional leadership capacity. Perhaps some of you have been part of those partnerships as well. And then, of course, we'll talk a little bit more here about the Ohio AIPL. And then there's a focus on central office. There's another exciting experience and partnership. You can engage with our central office work. And that's a space where leaders engage in a professional collaborative dialogue and discussion with colleagues from across the state. And they focus on applying these effective practices in their districts. So participants in that space will have an opportunity to engage in one-on-one performance coaching conversations that will support the implementation of the inclusive instructional leadership. Okay. So let's dig in a little deeper to what's different about AIPL. The Ohio AIPL is part of the National Advancing Inclusive Principal Leadership. There are several states involved. I believe 6 states at this time are involved in this work. And this is supported by the Council of Chief State School Officers. You might have heard that name as CCSSO, and the Collaboration on Effective Educator Development, Accountability, and Reform. And that is also known as the Cedar Center out of the University of Florida. So Ohio's AIPL is a 2-year professional learning program for vertical teams. And this is a vertical team might be a new term you've heard, but this is not like a permanent teaming structure. It's an ad hoc team composed of members from district central office or from some schools and who serve as a pilot school and other educators across the district. They examine, refine, and improve building leadership team strategies for engaging all students in learning. The vertical teams don't exist beyond this professional learning experience. Instead, the lessons learned in this work from the vertical team are incorporated back into those existing team structures. So the objective of this work has been to build a scope and sequence around these inclusive principal leadership practices using a common set of resources and tools which are aligned to Ohio's strategic plan, the existing principal standards, and a continuous improvement process. So open that up too if you all like to add anything additional. I know Jill or Becky or the team.
Well, I do want to mention that we are actually also, these are grant funded projects, so at no cost to the district. And the 3 projects that Johanna talked about are actually all enrolling right now. So just be thinking about that as we're presenting as well, which, you know, if AIPL may be a fit for you, or perhaps the OLI 4 or even the central office piece, as I know we have some central office administrators here as well. So just be thinking about that.
It's a great opportunity. All right, so we can go to the next slide. We're going to talk a little bit more about the vertical team here. As I said, each vertical team is an ad hoc team. And so their focus is to take what they experience and learn from the common discussion at their partnership meetings and build that back into their teaming structure back at the district. Each district brings up to 7 members to serve as this vertical team. And they typically have principals, and at least a teacher, the designated school principal, the district superintendent, or their designee in charge of curriculum and instruction, and the district's director of special education or pupil services. So the vertical teams, again, cross all levels and all roles in order to augment the system and ensure district-wide support of continuous improvement efforts that focuses on those 4 domains, those 4 inclusive instructional leadership practices, and how they operationalize at each of the team levels and how the teams then communicate up and down the chain. Since we have Poland with us, I'll stop here and ask if they want to share a little bit about how that works for them.
This is Paula, and I am Poland's coach. Our vertical team is made up of teachers, principal, special ed director, and assistant superintendent. And after our first meeting, we realized there was a very key person missing. And then Wendy Butch, the school counselor, joined and has brought a phenomenal amount of resources and ideas to the team. So the team started, and then it kind of flowed and changed as we saw fit.
Thank you, Paula. I think all the teams that are involved in this experience share the same thing. And I'd like to also mention that we did not ask teams to build a new plan or focus on a new shiny thing. They're to focus on the plan that they are already focused on, whatever that plan may be. They bring their own plan, their own work to this, but we're just focusing in on those practices to help sustain, build their plan forward with those inclusive practices.
And actually, if I could add, we are at the first year of creating, we're cohort 3, so we had to write our one needs assessment and our Ed Steps plan. So we are incorporating pieces of it into that plan. And pretty much this opportunity has really given us a chance to be able to talk and collaborate with each other. And have some really thoughtful, deep conversations. So the student engagement piece was really timely. I think, and not to keep going back to COVID, but we noticed a little bit more, lax in student engagement when we come back. So this has really provided us an opportunity to have some cohesive conversations. And currently we're doing this at our middle school. The team is in the process of talking about now, how do we expand it across the building? So they're just starting that. And we're also talking with the high school assistant principal to maybe perhaps get him involved next year to see how this work might align with their building as well.
Maria, thank you so much for adding that. And Johanna, if it's okay with you, I actually interviewed the Poland team on a podcast just a week or so ago. And so I'd love for us to just dive in a little bit more to their work for just a moment, if that's okay.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Well, let's go ahead and start with David then. David, I know that you're the building principal then. This is kind of your ad hoc team. You're the test site essentially for the improvement work. Can you tell us a bit about your impressions after this first year of AIPL and how the work is moving forward at your building?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having us here. We appreciate the opportunity. I think that anytime we as educators have an opportunity to be part of something that's truly going to help us grow and be reflective upon our practice, that's going to be meaningful and have a very intentional outcome, I think that any of us jump at those opportunities. So we're very glad to be a part. When I was first approached about this, just to go back a second here, I realized that we needed some key people to be part of the discussion. And I'm really, really glad that we've done that. We selected some teacher leaders who I think my intention was to find people that had a reflective personality already, that really look at their own practices and question those year to year. They have a genuine desire to grow students and have mutual respect from their colleagues. And then, bringing us together as a team as we started to dive into one of the very first sessions that we had was about engagement. And it was about student engagement and students taking ownership of their own engagement levels. And as simple as the conversation was, it hooked us all. And we looked at that as an opportunity to start the conversation about being consistent across grade levels and across content areas and what we're expecting from students, what we're seeing from students. That then led very, very naturally into unexpected to us. It's just, I think the program is designed very well and sequenced very well, where there were some examples given from other districts, whereas, whether it was their vision statements or was their expectations of what their graduates look like, what their students look like, and what the model they want for them. We were able to kind of put our heads together and really focus on is, are we expecting, are we seeing the things that we want from our own kids, and having real genuine conversations about that. That then leads naturally into a prioritizing practice. And so I'm very, very happy that to have the team we have, and just so everyone knows, we've got the best team around. So sorry for that, but just want to let everybody know we've got an amazing team here in Poland. We were able to have, I think, one of the best things that I'll say this from my perspective, one of the best things that I've seen by having a team of, an eclectic team, including, teachers and counselor, is some walls were broken down, and we were able to have some very, very reflective conversation that I don't think would have happened had we not included those people. Like, the nature of the presentations and the lessons were that of being transparent about what we're doing and why we're doing it, and are we doing it in the way that's most beneficial to our kids. And I think that our team each brought their own strengths to the table, and we had some challenging conversations that really made us focus on, our areas of growth and where we need to move to. I know those are all broad examples, but I'm just excited about the process that we're entering into. We've even we just had a PBIS meeting yesterday after school, and we've bridged the gap. We're going to actually include some of that engagement process for students in our PBIS plan, to give some reward systems along those lines for students for next year as well.
Well, David, thank you so much for that. I would love to just take a moment and hear from each educator on your team as to how that engagement piece, that focus area, as well as AIPL, has played out for them. I think it will give our principals that are attending the meeting some ideas as to how to engage their educators in that critical work. Nick, what if we start with you as the math teacher on the team?
Sure. Yeah, so one of the things I'm going to I'm really going to piggyback off what Mr. Pierce says. Well, I think the conversations that we had in those meetings, although uncomfortable, were just really, really meaningful, and I'm glad we had them. But going back to the engagement piece, our school counselor came in our classroom, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, probably a month or two ago, and we had she printed out the engagement pieces. So our students engaged, where do they think they're at in their engagement in the classroom? And students had to not only kind of pick where they are, but also show what qualities or what things show where they're at on the spectrum of engagement. So I thought it was really good for the students to actually see and then also know what it looks like to be engaged, and then the results that come from that. So I love that engagement piece, and I can't wait till next year to really, really implement it in the classroom.
Right, great, fantastic. Well, Haley, you're the language arts and social studies person. How about for you?
Yeah, so I was just sharing with Wendy. So I would like her to talk a little bit about how we started our year with something called Ready to Learn. And then at our first AIPL meeting, it was about student engagement. And so our Ready to Learn morphed into the student engagement piece. So I'm going to let her talk, and then I'll piggyback on how I've incorporated it in my room.
Yeah, so at the beginning of the school year, I went into all the 5th and 6th grade classrooms and talked about with the students, what does it look like to be ready to learn physically, emotionally, in relationships, and your mindset. And so we took each one of those areas and we had kids gauge like where they are, either when they're walking into the classroom, there's things that you can do inside the classroom, and there's things outside of the classroom. So like, for example, eating a good breakfast, getting a good night's sleep, making sure your homework's complete, your Chromebook is charged, like all of those things that they can take care of for themselves, and then come to school, take care of themselves here at school, take care of each other. And that ties into like our PBIS stuff. And so when we started talking in the leadership meetings about the levels of engagement, I saw where it fits in so well to the Ready to Learn lessons, because we talk about participating and having a growth mindset is part of being ready to learn. And, when you're participating, you're initiating, you're driving your education, how it ties into even your emotions. You feel good about your education and your confidence level increases. And so that kind of one thing morphed into another, especially in 6th grade. So go ahead.
We but full disclosure, I'm a person that if what I'm presented with is very research-based and scientifically proven, I usually jump into the deep end and learn how to swim. I'm not a tiptoeer. So after the first meeting, I was immediately ready to go with whatever I could go with. And so after Wendy did that lesson and we had student engagement, I really, in our following meetings, I really started to question in terms of my classroom and the district, what processes, what routines, what structures do we have in place, or what structures are we lacking that really either inhibit or enhance, right, student engagement and instruction. And so that became, I feel like that became sort of our focus then, is how do we look at what we have in place and how do we make adjustments to that? How do we improve that? We don't want to add anything, right? That was a big part of our discussion too.
Yeah.
We've added so much that we couldn't view this as one more thing. Instead, it was, what do we already have in place and how can we make that work better? And so our kids, we talked about our kids about, like, they have engagement. Many times in the lesson, I will stop and say, on your desk, use your finger, where are you at right now in the level of engagement? And then we talk about, well, how do we move to the next level of engagement? Why am I only on this level of engagement? What does it look like? What does it sound like? And it's just a lot of trying to make them aware of their own learning practices. So it has really become almost a daily reflection.
Yeah.
It is a daily
is
reflection.
a
Actually,
daily-
we did a Google form now that I think about it.
Yeah, we did a Google.
And we collected data from the 6th graders about the engagement process. And then we used that data to try, Wendy came back in to our rooms and addressed where we were seeing certain weaknesses, or we would pull certain kids and say, we're consistently seeing you this level of engagement when we are doing explicit instruction. So, and then we would talk about, well, how can we be more engaged during this part of the classroom?
Yeah. And we're really having candid conversations using the language with the students. So they're learning for themselves and building that awareness. So hopefully they take it with them in the years to come, that this is all stays relevant to them. And so I really enjoy the conversations going into the classrooms and having those conversations with the kids about, why do you think you're in, at this level as opposed to this level? And they're figuring it out for themselves. And even like when we look at the Google Forms, their feedback is pretty honest. And that's great to see because you can't grow if you're not honest. So yeah, a lot of
Well,
credit to our kids.
Well, I think it speaks to the power of the vertical team, and also the breaking down of silos. I think is so important for us to all get on the same page to really champion our students. So thank you so much for sharing that. Johanna, I'll turn it back over to you. I just wanted to make sure we heard all of the good stuff going on in Poland.
Thank you to the Poland team. That was excellent. It is really all about, if our students aren't engaged, then what are we doing? Like, what are our practices that we're doing, right? So it's right on. Scott, did you have something you want to add too? Applause.
I was just clapping.
Okay, great. That's awesome. So the next slide goes into, because guess what? Once you have your team and you start looking at practices and what you're doing, and you're checking in with the students and seeing if they're engaged and what you're doing is working, this is the focus. If we have some change that we need to make, or we need to build capacity, or we need to build sustainability of some of our practices, typically what we found works best is having a coach. So there's this whole coaching component that goes along with this. So you heard a little bit from Maria. Each team has a coach, and the coach really helps support and facilitate those discussions, that collaboration during our sessions. And we have these learning experiences together. The teams learn together, hear the information together, but then break off into groups. And then they have some breakout sessions where they can dive deep into, what did we hear? What do we learn about some particular practice? and inclusive practice? And how do we want to apply or think about, are we doing that with our work, with our plan? So the coach facilitates this. The coach also provides that vertical team and possibly the superintendent some specific learning lessons and directions and guidance. So there's a coach attached. And how, I don't, what about the Poland team? How did you feel about having a coach attached with this work?
I'll take that one. I think one of the things that was extremely beneficial to me as the quote unquote building leader is the meetings in between sessions helped to really focus, connection between each lesson and then implementation. So when you think about those 4 categories of system-wide learning and building capacity and prioritizing and then making sure you sustain the process, I think that's what I'm most concerned about. Is right now I've got a team who's energized, and I've got to make sure I provide the structure to sustain the process. One of the first things that one of my teachers challenged me with the very first session was, turned right to me and said, "Dave, are you willing to let us go?" And she's laughing because she knows who she is. But I mean, it was a good introspective question for me to say, if I'm really going to share this, I can't think that I have to control it all, and you have to trust your people. So now that's the pressure I have, is to try to make sure that I develop a system that allows them to function at their best ability. And the coach has been really very, very, I guess, encouraging and provided great knowledge for us, Mrs. Ekus, for me personally, from her experience and from the information from the trainings that are going to help me to make sure that happens. So it's appreciated.
Right on. That rocks. That's great. I'm perfect. Glad to hear that as your experience and how you're applying the use of the coach. So I'm going to pass this back over to Becky, and she's going to share a little bit about the evaluation and findings that we've had along the way.
Yes,
give you
well, thank you. Oh, Scott.
Just want to give you a time check.
Yeah.
Because we're scheduled to close at 10:30, just to make
That
you aware.
sounds
So-
great.
Thank you.
I will just move quickly through so that we even have time for questions, hopefully. Just, I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation about the research basis and the evaluation of the program. It is evaluated externally, and I just wanted to show some of the results. This is cohort 1. You can see that we rank for quality, relevance, and usefulness, and really, really great ratings. And then we have cohort 2 that is part of the Poland group. And what we love to see here is that ongoing increased satisfaction with the program. So just wanted to share that if you're thinking about getting involved in the program. So cohort 1 is in year 2, and you can see the districts that have engaged, districts from really all walks of life, all different areas and that kind of thing. We have Bethel Tate, Clemrott Northeastern, East Cleveland, and Licking Heights. So they do 4 meetings in their second year, and they continue with that coaching model as well. Cohort 2 is in year 1. As you heard Poland discuss, they've really kind of named where they're going to focus their work. And next year is going to be really about putting that work into action for their students and at their building. So that's that piece. We do, as I mentioned before, have AIPL open for signups. And so if you want more information about the program, I do have a contact information for you, though I believe we can also send out this registration information as well to everyone who's participated, hopefully, and perhaps maybe even provide it on the link with this for the site. You can see there when the sessions are. They are all virtual. The coaching component is mostly virtual, though it can be in person, as our
Becky,
Poland team
Becky, we
mentioned.
need to,
Yes.
there we go. We needed to advance the slides.
Oh, okay. Yes, there we go. Are we good? Are we on how to apply? Can everyone see that? Yep. Okay, great. So you can see a QR code there that you can actually scan right now, or as I said, we can send you this flyer and the information as well. Kathy Lassiter is facilitating our learning for those who sign up for cohort 3, which will start next year. And then we do have an opportunity that we also wanted to throw out there for everyone here at the principal chat this month, and actually all of your colleagues across the state. We are having a statewide in-person convening for vertical teams so that you can hear more about what other teams are doing in addition to Poland in their work in their buildings. And so just wanted to quickly share that schedule with you as well. There is a QR code here where you can register for this. This is as well a free opportunity. You can see there that as part of the keynote, we will have Andy Hargraves with us. So what an amazing opportunity for district building level leaders and our educators across the state to hear from an expert in the field, and also a time to be able to hear about the work that's going on throughout the state in regards to inclusive instructional leadership. So please consider registering for that event May 31st, and we'll kick off at 9 a.m. And so here is the contact information of Libby Wallach. She helps to coordinate registration for the programs. If you have any more questions or you would like to find out more about really any of the programs that we mentioned today, OLI4, AIPL, or the Central Office Project, please reach out to her. She can get you in touch with us as well. We can answer those questions as well. But just wanted to open it up to see if anyone had additional questions or wanted to add anything. I know I went through that rather quickly, but I wanted to give us a few minutes here at the end for conversation.
Does the Poland team have any summarizing statement you'd like to make on the work and the impact and why we need to focus on the importance of inclusive practices?
Okay, I was hesitating whether or not this is relevant, but I do want to point out that we are not in the OIP process. Our district is historically high achieving in terms of achievement, but we've been seeing our trends and data that we're not closing the achievement gap. And so I just do think it's important to point out that inclusive practices, right, is everyone and everything. And so this is truly something that I'm completely invested in and have already seen the changes in both myself as a classroom teacher and in the kids and their ability to take some ownership of their own learning more than they were before. So just
Kelly, thank you for sharing that. I think it's important to name that. I mentioned briefly the diversity of the districts who participate, but I think it's really important. Many of us do come from high-performing districts, but we can always do better for our kids, and recognizing that, I think, as an educator is part of really what makes our educators great here in the state of Ohio, for sure. So thank you.
Yes, I'd certainly like to thank all of you for participating today and for the Poland team for sharing the impact that this work is having in your district. And if we could advance the slide to the next principal chat slide. We hold these chats on the second Wednesday of each month at 9:30. The next one is scheduled for June 14th, and our focus topic is going to be around climate, culture, and traditions. And so we would love to have you join us. Please share with your colleagues that we have the chats. We do record and we will post, but we'd like to grow the involvement with our chats. And we do have an exit survey we would like you to complete. So the next slide has a QR code. There we go. If you could take a moment and just respond to the survey questions, it will help guide us as we move forward. Scott, anything you want to say in closing?
No, other than thank you for all of the hard work that you do, and it's almost June, so hang in there.
So that ends today's chat.